Zara Vex stood at the viewport of the Arxian transit vessel, watching the stars blur past with an expression of studied indifference. Her slender fingers tapped a rhythm on her datapad as she reviewed her assignment for the fifth time that morning. The blue light of the screen highlighted the sharp angles of her face and reflected in her silver eyes that had found fatal flaws in the most celebrated ships across 3 galactic sectors. Engineer Vex, the ship's communication system announced. "We will dock at Earth's orbital station in 20 minutes. She didn't bother to acknowledge the message. After 15 years as the Arxian Shipbuilding Authority's most demanding inspector, Zara had earned the luxury of being impolite. No one complained when you had rejected positions on vessels that others would kill for, when you had walked away from the helm of ships worth more than some planetary economies. The impossible inspector, they called her behind her back. The woman who could find the single loose wire that would eventually cause a catastrophic failure. The microscopic stress fracture that would split open in deep space. Some claimed she could sense these flaws through the hull just by placing her hand against it. What they didn't understand was that it wasn't a gift. It was attention to detail, a refusal to accept the shortcuts that others embraced. Standards that never bent, never compromised. And now the Arxian High Command wanted her to evaluate human ships. Humans, the newest species to join the Galactic Alliance, barely a century into their interstellar development. Their vessels were known for being oddly constructed. Functional, yes, but with engineering solutions that made proper Arxian designers cringe. Zara slipped her datapad into her pocket and straightened her perfectly pressed uniform. The humans had been eager for this exchange, offering their flagship for inspection as a gesture of goodwill. The Arxians had sent Zara, not as a gesture of goodwill, but as a test the humans were expected to fail. "Just document the major flaws," her supervisor had told her. "We need to know what we're dealing with before we integrate their technology." The transit ship docked with a gentle thud that Zara immediately categorized as 0.05 degrees off perfect alignment. Not enough to report, but enough to notice. She gathered her small bag of inspection tools and made her way to the airlock. As it cycled open, the different air of the human station hit her, slightly warmer, with traces of scents her brain couldn't immediately identify. A man in a blue uniform waited on the other side, his face arranged in what humans called a smile. Zara had studied their expressions, preparing for this mission. "Engineer Vex," he said, extending his hand in their customary greeting. "I'm Captain Frank Collins of the U.S. Orion. Welcome to Earth Station Alpha." She took his hand briefly, noting the firmness of his grip. "Captain, I trust your vessel is prepared for inspection." His smile didn't falter. "She's ready and waiting. Though I should warn you, we do things a bit differently than you might be used to." "So I've heard," Zara replied, her tone making it clear this wasn't a positive observation. "I set aside quarters for you aboard the Orion," he continued. "My chief engineer, Alice Ward, is eager to show you around." "I prefer to begin immediately," Zara said. "I find first impressions most revealing." Frank nodded, seeming unsurprised by her directness. "Of course. This way to the shuttle bay." As they walked through the station corridors, Zara noticed the surprising efficiency of the layout. Not elegant like Arxian design, but practical in a way she hadn't expected. She said nothing, making mental notes for her report. What she wouldn't admit, even to herself, was the small flicker of curiosity that had ignited somewhere behind her professional detachment. For the first time in years, Zara Vex was about to see something truly new. The shuttle approached the U.S. Orion, giving Zara her first complete view of the human vessel. She had expected something crude, perhaps even ugly by Arxian standards. What floated before her was neither. The Orion wasn't sleek like Arxian ships, nor was it perfectly symmetrical like the Valerian cruisers. Instead, it had a functional quality that somehow managed to be graceful. The hull featured unexpected curves alongside angular sections, looking less like it was designed and more like it had evolved. "What do you think?" Captain Collins asked, noticing her extended silence. "It's unusual," Zara said, choosing her words carefully. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of hearing approval, even if the ship's external design was more interesting than she had anticipated. The shuttle pilot guided them into one of the Orion's docking bays, a spacious area filled with other small craft and busy crew members. As they disembarked, Zara immediately began cataloging details: the slight vibration in the deck plates, the hum of the environmental systems, the way sound traveled through the space. A woman with curly red hair pulled back in a practical ponytail approached them, wiping her hands on a cloth that she then tucked into her pocket. Grease stained the knees of her uniform, and a tool belt hung at her waist. "Engineer Vex, this is Lieutenant Alice Ward, our chief engineer," Frank said. "You're dirty," Zora observed, not offering her hand. Alice grinned. "Always am when something interesting is happening. Just finished recalibrating the port thruster assembly. Would have cleaned up, but I heard you wanted to start immediately." Zara raised an eyebrow. On an Arxian vessel, no engineer would present themselves to a visitor in such a state. It suggested disorder, lack of discipline. "I'll show you to your quarters first," Frank offered. "Give you a chance to settle in before the tour." "That won't be necessary," Zara replied. "I prefer to see the engineering sections while they're functioning normally, not after they've been prepared for inspection." Alice and Frank exchanged a glance that Zara couldn't quite interpret. "As you wish," Frank said. "Alice, show Engineer Vex whatever she wants to see. I'll catch up with you both later." As the captain departed, Alice gestured toward a corridor. "Let's start with the engine room. That's usually what inspectors are most interested in." They walked through corridors that were busier than Zora was accustomed to. Crew members moved with purpose but stopped to greet Alice by name. Some nodded respectfully to Zora, while others regarded her with undisguised curiosity. "Your crew seems informal," Zora noted. "We're effective," Alice replied without defensiveness. "Frank believes a ship runs better when people feel like they belong on it, not just work on it." The engine room doors slid open, revealing a space that made Zora stop in her tracks. Unlike the clean, organized engine rooms of Arxian vessels, this one looked almost chaotic at first glance. Workstations were personalized. Tools hung from magnetic strips along walls instead of being stored in proper cabinets. The massive warp core pulsed with energy in the center, but the monitoring systems around it were arranged in patterns that made no immediate sense to her. "This is," Zara began, ready to deliver a cutting assessment. "Different from what you're used to," Alice finished for her. "I know. But before you judge, let me show you what it can do." She led Zara to a control panel and pulled up performance metrics that made the Arxian blink in surprise. The efficiency ratings were higher than should be possible with their level of technology. "These readings can't be accurate," Zara said. "They are," Alice replied simply. "We pushed the theoretical limits last month. Had to redesign half the coolant system to make it work, but the results speak for themselves." For the first time in years, Zara felt something unexpected, a small seed of doubt about her own certainty. "Show me the coolant system," she demanded, unwilling to believe what she was seeing. Alice smiled. "With pleasure. This is where it gets interesting." Alice led Zora through a maze of conduits and access tunnels that seemed to follow no logical layout. While Arxian ships were designed with perfect symmetry and efficiency of movement, the Orion's internal structure appeared almost organic in its growth pattern. "This makes no sense," Zora muttered as they crawled through a maintenance shaft that curved unnecessarily. "Why not design straight pathways?" Alice ducked under a pipe before answering. "The original design was different. We added this section after encountering a magnetic anomaly that damaged part of the hull. Rather than rebuild to the original specs, we adapted." "So your ships are constantly changing?" Zara asked, unable to hide her horror at such a concept. "Evolving," Alice corrected with a smile. "Living things don't stay the same. Why should ships?" They emerged into the coolant control room, where two engineers were midway through what appeared to be an argument. They fell silent when they noticed Zara. "Don't stop on my account," she said dryly. "Engineer Vex is here to inspect our systems," Alice explained. Sam Kelly, tell her what you were just discussing. The male engineer, Sam, spoke first. We were debating whether to reroute auxiliary coolant through the new carbon mesh filters or keep the standard configuration. The carbon mesh would increase efficiency by 4%, Kelly added. But Sam thinks it might reduce responsiveness during emergency shutdowns. Zara frowned. Your manual doesn't specify the correct procedure. All three humans laughed, which only deepened her frown. Our manuals are more like suggestions, Alice explained. We encourage everyone to think beyond them. The concept was so foreign to Zara that she struggled to respond. On Arxian vessels, deviation from procedure was grounds for immediate removal from duty. Here, it seemed to be encouraged. Alice walked her through the coolant system modifications, explaining how they had combined traditional liquid cooling with a phase-changing gas that could rapidly absorb heat during power spikes. It was unorthodox, but undeniably effective. This shouldn't work, Zara said, studying the schematics. The thermal expansion rates alone should cause ruptures in these junctions. Alice tapped a section of the display. That's why we added these flexible couplings here and here. They're made from a polymer developed for deep sea exploration on Earth. They expand and contract without losing seal integrity. Zara had to admit, if only to herself, that the solution was elegant in its simplicity. She would never have considered combining such disparate technologies. They continued to the warp core, where more surprises awaited. The humans had modified the standard containment field with what they called layered redundancies, essentially creating fields within fields that could fail in sequence rather than catastrophically. But this reduces your maximum output, Zora pointed out. By about 7%, Alice agreed. But it means we can run continuous operations for 3 times as long without a complete shutdown for maintenance. The trade-off works in our favor. As the tour progressed through propulsion systems, life support, and weapons arrays, Zara found herself asking more questions and making fewer criticisms. Each system revealed the same pattern, unconventional combinations of technologies that sacrificed theoretical perfection for practical resilience. By the time they reached the bridge 4 hours later, Zara's datapad was filled with notes. Captain Collins was waiting for them, chatting easily with his navigation officer. Engineer Vex, he greeted her. How was the tour? Zara hesitated, unwilling to give the satisfaction of praise, but equally unwilling to lie. Your ship has interesting features, Captain. Alice grinned beside her. From an Arxian inspector, that's practically a love letter. I didn't say it meets standards, Zora clarified quickly. Merely that some of your solutions are unconventional. We're having dinner in the officers' mess at 1900 hours, Frank said. You're welcome to join us. Engineers usually get into the really good technical discussions after a drink or two. The invitation surprised her. On inspection tours, she typically ate alone, reviewing her findings. I'll consider it, she replied, which was more consideration than she'd given any social invitation in years. As they left the bridge, Zara realized with a start that for the first time in her career, she was actually looking forward to the next day's inspection. 3 days into her inspection, Zara found herself in the observation lounge with a cup of what humans called coffee. She had refused to admit it, but the bitter beverage had grown on her. Much like the Orion itself, the ship was traveling at warp speed toward a rendezvous with an Arxian science vessel, a journey specifically arranged to demonstrate the Orion's capabilities in action. Zara watched the stars streak by, trying to organize her conflicting thoughts about what she had seen. The sudden blaring of alarms shattered her contemplation. All hands, brace for emergency maneuvers, Captain Collins' voice announced over the communication system. Unknown gravitational anomaly detected directly in our path. Zara gripped her chair as the ship lurched violently. The stars outside the viewport twisted in impossible patterns as the Orion attempted to change course. A second, more powerful jolt sent her tumbling to the floor. The lights flickered and dimmed to emergency levels. Through the viewport, she could see they had dropped out of warp, now drifting in unfamiliar space with a swirling mass of energy visible in the distance. Zara picked herself up and ran toward engineering, professional curiosity overriding protocol. The corridors were filled with crew members moving with urgent purpose, but notably without panic. When she reached engineering, chaos reigned. Alice stood at the central console, calling out orders as her team worked frantically. Containment field is fluctuating. Someone shouted, "We're losing stability in the warp core. Reroute power through the secondary buffers." Alice responded, fingers flying across her console. Zara assessed the situation quickly. The readings showed that the gravitational anomaly had created a feedback loop in the warp drive systems. On an Arxian vessel, the standard procedure would be an immediate shutdown and restart sequence. "You need to initiate a cold restart," she said, stepping forward. Alice shook her head. "Can't. The anomaly's interfering with our ability to safely power down. If we try, we'll lose containment entirely." "That's impossible," Zara insisted. "The safety protocols are failing." Alice cut her off. "We need another solution." Zara stared at the readouts, her mind racing through options. What she was seeing defied standard engineering responses. The Orion's unique systems were interacting with the anomaly in ways she hadn't encountered before. Without thinking about it, she stepped to an empty console. "Let me help." Alice glanced at her in surprise but nodded. "Sam, get Engineer Vex access to the system diagnostics." Zara's fingers flew across the unfamiliar interface as she absorbed the data. An idea, unorthodox by any standard, began to form in her mind. "Your coolant system modifications," she said suddenly. "The phase-changing gas. If we reverse the process, we could create a controlled power surge through the containment field." Alice looked at her skeptically. "That would normally blow out half our systems." "Yes, but your layered redundancies would fail sequentially, not catastrophically," Zora explained, her words coming faster. "If we time it right, we could use the surge to break the feedback loop without losing core integrity." It was a solution no proper Arxian engineer would suggest. Risky, imprecise, and likely to damage systems unnecessarily. But it might work. Alice studied the proposal for 3 seconds before nodding. "It's crazy, but it's our best shot. Let's do it." The next 10 minutes were the most intense of Zora's career. Working side by side with Alice, she helped implement the makeshift solution, calling out calculations as the human team raced to execute them. "Ready on your mark," Alice said finally, her finger hovering over the activation control. Zara took a deep breath. "Mark." The lights dimmed completely before a cascade of energy surged through the ship. Panels sparked and systems howled in protest. For one terrible moment, Zara thought she had doomed them all. Then, gradually, the reading stabilized. The containment field, while weakened, held. The feedback loop broke. "We did it," Alice whispered, then louder to her team. "We did it." Core stability returning to normal parameters. The engineering crew broke into spontaneous applause. In the midst of their celebration, Zara stood perfectly still, processing what had just happened. She had violated every principle of proper engineering she had spent her career defending. And in doing so, she had saved the ship. The Orion limped through space at half-impulse power, its damaged systems slowly being repaired by tireless engineering teams. Zara sat in her assigned quarters, surrounded by human technical manuals she had requested after the crisis. She had barely slept in the 24 hours since they had escaped the anomaly, her mind too full of questions. The door chimed softly. "Enter," she called, not looking up from her reading. Captain Collins stepped inside, carrying 2 steaming bugs. "Coffee," he said, offering one to her. "Alice said you've developed a taste for it." Zora accepted the mug but frowned. "Is that relevant information for a ship's captain?" Frank smiled as he sat in the chair across from her. "On a human vessel, yes. Knowing my crew is part of my job." He gestured to the scattered manuals. "Finding anything interesting?" Zara hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Your technical philosophy is not what I expected." "In what way?" "Arxian ships are designed to prevent failure at all costs," she explained. But these manuals, they assume failure will happen. They're designed around it. Frank nodded. We call it graceful failure. Our history taught us that trying to build perfect systems is less effective than building systems that can break in predictable, manageable ways. Zora picked up one of the manuals. This power regulation system is deliberately designed to fail before more critical systems. It sacrifices itself. Like a fuse, Frank said. An ancient human invention. A simple piece that fails first to protect more complex pieces. But this creates unnecessary inefficiency, Zora argued, though her voice lacked its usual conviction. Frank took a sip of his coffee. Does it? What's more efficient? A perfect system that works flawlessly until suddenly it doesn't, or an imperfect system that bends instead of breaking? The question struck Zora with unexpected force. Her entire career had been built around pursuing theoretical perfection. She had rejected countless ships because they failed to meet impossible standards. Yet here was a vessel that had survived what should have been a catastrophic event, precisely because it embraced imperfection. Your solution during a crisis, Frank continued. Alice told me it wasn't by the book. Not by our book, and certainly not by yours. It was improvised, Zora admitted. Imprecise. And effective. Frank leaned forward. That's what we value most. Results over theory. Adaptation over perfection. Zara was quiet for a long moment. In Arxian space, what we did would be considered reckless. I would likely lose my certification for suggesting such a procedure. Even though it saved the ship. The outcome isn't considered as important as following proper procedure, she said, realizing how strange it sounded as she spoke the words. Frank smiled gently. May I ask you something personal, Engineer Vex? She nodded cautiously. In 15 years, you've never accepted a permanent position on any vessel you've inspected. Is that because none of them were perfect enough? The question was uncomfortably direct. I have high standards, she replied stiffly. Standards that no ship could possibly meet. Frank observed. I wonder if perhaps you've been looking for the wrong thing all along. Zara started to object, then stopped. The captain's words resonated with a doubt that had been growing inside her since she first set foot on the Orion. What should I be looking for, then? She asked quietly. Not perfection, Frank said, but perhaps a place where your brilliance can make a difference, where your understanding of theoretical perfection could combine with our practical adaptability. He stood to leave, letting her consider his words. At the door, he paused. The crew is gathering in the mess hall tonight. A small celebration for making it through yesterday in one piece. You're welcome to join us. After he left, Zara sat motionless, staring at the technical manuals spread before her. For the first time in her career, she was questioning not just a ship's specifications, but the very standards she had used to judge them. The revelation was both unsettling and strangely liberating. The final day of Zara's inspection arrived with a sense of inevitability. Her report was nearly complete, saved on her datapad and ready to be transmitted to Arxian High Command. She had been thorough, as always, documenting every system on the Orion in meticulous detail. Yet she found herself hesitating to send it. The mess hall celebration 3 nights ago had changed something in her. Watching the crew laugh together, seeing Alice demonstrate the makeshift repair they'd implemented by using salt shakers and cups on the table, hearing the stories of previous ingenious solutions to impossible problems. It had all affected her more than she cared to admit. Zara stood in the shuttle bay, her small bag packed for departure. The Arxian transit vessel would arrive within the hour to take her back to her people, where she would deliver her report and move on to her next assignment. As always. So this is it? Alice asked, approaching from behind. Back to inspecting proper ships. Zara turned. My assignment is complete. And your verdict? Alice raised an eyebrow. Do we pass the legendary Zara Vex inspection? The question was more complicated than it should have been. By Arxian standards, the Orion failed in dozens of ways. Its systems were inconsistent. Its design philosophy prioritized adaptation over optimization, and its crew operated with a flexibility that bordered on chaos by Arxian standards. Yet it worked. Not just adequately, but brilliantly. Your ship is, Zora paused, choosing her words carefully. Effective. In its own way. Alice grinned. High praise indeed. She hesitated, then added, You know, we never properly thank you for your help during the crisis. Without your insight, we might not have made it. I merely applied engineering principles to the situation, Zara said stiffly. No. Alice shook her head. You did what we do. You improvised, adapted, and trusted your instincts over the rulebook. You'd make a good human engineer. Before Zora could respond to this unexpected compliment, Captain Collins entered the shuttle bay. Engineer Vex. He greeted her with a nod. I came to see you off personally. That's not necessary, Captain. Perhaps not, he agreed. But I also came with a proposition. Zara raised an eyebrow. A proposition. Starfleet is expanding its technical exchange program. We're looking for engineers from allied species who can bring new perspectives to our fleet. Frank handed her a small data crystal. This is a formal invitation to join the Orion as our Arxian technical consultant. Zara stared at the crystal in her palm. You're offering me a position. On this ship. I am. Frank confirmed. Alice specifically requested you. The chief engineer nodded. Your obsession with theoretical perfection, balanced with our practical approach, could lead to some interesting innovations. For a moment, Zara couldn't speak. In 15 years, she had never considered accepting a position on any of the vessels she'd inspected. She had always found them lacking in some critical way. My duties to the Arxian Shipbuilding Authority, she began, would be fulfilled through the exchange program. Frank finished for her. You'd still file reports and contribute to Arxian ship design. You'd just be doing it from here. The idea was absurd. Staying on this imperfect vessel with its unpredictable crew and its constantly evolving systems, it went against everything she had worked for throughout her career. And yet, I need time to consider this, she said finally. Frank nodded. The transit vessel won't be here for another 45 minutes. Take all the time you need. He turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, Engineer Vex, no one on this ship expects perfection. We just expect your best. As they left her alone in the shuttle bay, Zara opened her datapad and looked at her completed report. All the facts were there, all the technical details documented with her usual precision. But something was missing, something about the spirit of this vessel and its crew that couldn't be captured in technical specifications. With sudden decision, she began to type a new conclusion to her report, one that would shock her superiors but felt, for the first time in her career, entirely right. 6 months later, Zara stood in the Orion's newly redesigned engine room, studying the holographic display of their latest modification. The hybrid system combined Arxian precision with human adaptability in ways that neither culture would have developed independently. Power efficiency is up another 3%. She noted, allowing herself a small smile of satisfaction. And the emergency response time has improved by nearly 7 seconds. Alice nodded approvingly as she circled the hologram. The Arxian layered containment field was the missing piece. We never would have thought to use it that way. And no proper Arxian engineer would have connected it to a dynamically adjusting power grid, Zora replied. It would have been considered too unpredictable. The past 6 months had transformed both Zara and the ship she now called home. Her decision to accept Frank's offer had shocked her superiors at the Arxian Shipbuilding Authority. Several had predicted she would return within weeks, unable to tolerate the human approach to engineering. Instead, she had thrived. Commander Ward to the bridge, came Frank's voice over the communication system. Bring Engineer Vex with you. Alice raised an eyebrow. Commander. Still not used to that title. You earned it, Zara said simply. Alice's promotion to second officer had come after her leadership during a rescue mission to a stranded Valerian transport ship. A successful operation had used several of their new hybrid systems, proving their worth in a crisis situation. They made their way to the bridge, where Frank waited with a transmission on the main screen. Zara recognized the stern face of Director Krell from Arxian High Command. Captain Collins, The director's voice was as formal as Zara remembered. "I've reviewed the technical specifications you transmitted. The Arxian Shipbuilding Authority is interested in further discussions about these hybrid designs." Frank glanced at Zara with a slight smile. "We're pleased to hear that, Director. Engineer Vex has been instrumental in their development." The director's gaze shifted to Zara. "Engineer Vex, your reports have been most illuminating. Some found them controversial, but the results speak for themselves." "Thank you, Director," Zora replied, maintaining her professional demeanor despite the pride she felt. "We are dispatching a technical team to study these innovations firsthand. They will arrive at your next port of call." The director paused, then added, "It seems your unorthodox assignment has proven more valuable than anticipated." After the transmission ended, Frank turned to Zara with a full smile. "Congratulations, you've just begun an engineering revolution." "We've begun it," she corrected him, gesturing to include Alice and the bridge crew. "I could never have developed these systems alone." Later that evening, Zara stood in the observation lounge, watching the stars stream by. The door opened behind her, and Frank joined her at the viewport. "Credit for your thoughts?" he asked. "I was thinking about standards," she replied. "About how mine have changed." Frank nodded. "For the better." "For the different," Zora said. "6 months ago, I would have said a perfect ship was one where every system operated precisely according to theoretical optimums. Now I understand that a truly perfect ship adapts, evolves, surprises. Like the Orion," Frank suggested. "Like her crew," Zora countered, turning to face him. Their relationship had evolved too, from professional respect to something deeper that neither had fully defined yet. Another work in progress, another adaptation. "The Arxian team will arrive next week," she continued. "They'll bring their rigid expectations and perfect theories. And you'll show them another way," Frank said confidently. Zara smiled, a full, genuine smile that would have shocked her former colleagues. "We will," she corrected him, "together." As they stood side by side watching the stars, Zora reflected on the irony of her situation. After 15 years of searching for the perfect ship and finding every vessel wanting, she had finally found her place on the most imperfect ship of all. And somehow, that made the Orion absolutely perfect.